Hello everyone, this is part 6 of What If Naruto was banished and goes back to Konoha, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
When Naruto and his new group, comprised of Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba, and Aburame Shino, arrived in the town in question, they were quite disappointed to find no clues as to their prospective prey. Naruto wanted to get the jump on this mission as soon as possible, but now this old bastard didn't even have the courtesy of showing up. After a few rounds of jeering with Kiba for his annoying behavior, and a jab in the arm from Hinata to shut both of them up, the group found some lodging for the night. It was obvious that their target wasn't going to show himself anytime soon. So, started Naruto, as in the rest of the group and himself climbed the hotel stairs to their rooms. Do you guys know anything about our guy? Tsunade said we shouldn't sweat any details, replied Kiba. She just told us that you would be in charge of that, and that if you got into trouble, that we were to keep you in line. She didn't let you guys in on anything, said Naruto. We're shinobi, said Shino, in his monotone voice. We simply do what we're told to. If Tsunade-sama wanted to let us know anything, she would have done so. Besides Naruto-san, said Hinata, it's dusk now. If he was going to come, he would have. It's best just to wait until tomorrow. Naruto sighed in defeat. He was outnumbered on this topic 3-1. And Tsunade told him herself, they're only here to make sure all Kyuubi stays put. By what means they would do that, he had no idea. Perhaps she meant that he was expendable. He shook off those horrible thoughts, as he waved goodnight to his teammates and went to his room to sleep. It was rather peaceful for the first going hours of the night. Naruto was sound asleep, deciding not even to bother changing out of his outfit. It was still pretty warm at night, so he just laid there on the bed, in his orange outfit he bought from Tenten's shop a while back. Tezumateki was resting peacefully next to the bed, taking up most of the wall's height. He had the window open, letting a cross-draft cycle throughout the tiny simple room. Being a shinobi, Naruto was well skilled in keeping his senses awake while letting his mind rest. After all, an enemy could attack at any time, and being alert or asleep usually was a deciding factor of surviving an assault. As such, his closed left eye twitched slightly, as he heard a faint noise coming outside. He woke himself up, and slowly his brain picked up the sound better as it was turning back on. It was a faint, wet sound, followed by a louder sound of the same texture. He thought it over a minute. It was then that he remembered that the lodge they were staying at did have an outdoor bath. It was mostly to help the building keep profits at an acceptable rate, as this town wasn't exactly a tourist trap. Still, it made the place very inviting for travelers who needed a place to stay for the night. He was about to fall asleep again, seeing no reason to keep alert for bathing lodges. However, he then heard something mixed in with the sounds of relaxation and splashing water. He quirked a brow at it. Was he hearing giggling? He decided to take a look out the window. He leaned out of it, and turned his head right in the direction of the outdoor bath. He saw the high bamboo walls, made to prevent any perverts from entrance. Naruto was high enough to also see the bathers, two girls who were simply laying back on the stone pit's wall and soaking up the water. He then looked to the perimeter of the bath, and saw what appeared to be a white bush. Naruto exited his room, Tezumateki strapped to his back, and ran into Hinata, Kiba, and Shino in the hallway. They looked up and dressed the same way Naruto was. So, you heard it too, eh? Asked Kiba, a little irritable that someone disturbed his sleep. Yeah, answered Naruto. So I guess you guys are going down to the bath to check it out too. It might not be necessary for all four of us to go, debated Shino, but it would give the man a good enough scare to say the least. Plus I'm still pissed that he woke me up, said Kiba. So I'm going to take it out on somebody who deserves it, like that pervert. Hinata, what about you? Asked Naruto, looking to the quiet Hyuga. Well, I certainly wouldn't want anyone looking at me in such a private place, said Hinata. So I'm with Shino on this one, let's teach this man a lesson. Alright then, let's bag us a peeping Tom, said Naruto, heading down the staircase and towards the bath. He picked a rather fabulous night to go out searching, and he was grateful for that to say the least. He peered through the tiny eye hole he made with a kunai, and the specimens inside with a pick of the litter. He giggled to himself, writing down notes on a pad by sense writing, much like a journalist does. He took a sharp inward breath as one of the ladies stood up, and walked over to her companion to get to a more comfortable sitting place. Hey you, he heard a voice behind him. Oh great, so much for his fun. It wasn't that he wasn't used to this kind of scenario, but couldn't the four behind him have waited just a few more minutes? The girls inside were looking about the bath, trying to find the source of the outburst they just heard. He mumbled a few prayers that they wouldn't notice the peephole. Thankfully, they two young ladies just shrugged at each other, and continued with their baths. The man took the moment to turn around and see his new uninvited guests. What he saw was Naruto, Tezumateki unsheathed, Hinata, her Yukan stance setting up, her Byakugan activated, Kiba, who was perched downward in a mauling position, and Shino, who simply stood there while bugs crawled down his right arm. The man himself looked reminiscent of the old days of kabuki theater, gaudy and flashy clothing, with simple color schemes and tone patterns. His hair was huge to say the least, and was white as snow. He wore a dark shirt with a blood-red vest over it. His hands were huge and worn, with knuckle guards on both hands. His pants were like a simple peasant's attire, and were colored a dull gray. He was knelt down on old-fashioned sandals, which lifted him off the ground a few inches. What do you think you're doing? Asked Naruto. I'm doing research, boy, now bugger off, said the man, as he turned around to his peephole again. Listen Pops, spoke up Kiba, this is a warning. Just leave and you won't get hurt. The man laughed at Kiba's threat. Like I haven't heard that one a million times, boy. If you think you can stop me, by all means, he replied, scratching a few more notes into his book. Kiba growled at the man's aloofness. Inuzukas weren't exactly known for their self-control, and Kiba was a strong example of his family at that. He charged the man right then and there, his speed blinding to most men, as he ran on all fours. He leapt into the air, like a panther coming out of the bush to kill its prey. However, the man sighed, put his pencil and pad away, and then grabbed Kiba in midair. Kiba was shocked to say the least, but before he could escape the man's clutches, the man threw him over the bamboo wall, a smarmy grin on his mug. The sound of girls screaming, and of a boy getting the crap kicked out of him could be heard over the bamboo wall. The man then turned his attention to the other three pests. Shino raised his right arm, pointing it at the man like a spear. A swarm of bugs started to form around Shino's hand. The man didn't flinch, as he preformed some kata as Shino gathered his insects. Konchu Ishuyari, muttered Shino, as the insects suddenly sprang forward, in the shape of a column with a narrow tip. Not good enough, kid, smirked the man. Mazuden, Mazuba Shirikanadzushi, he spoke, as he spewed forth a giant spout of water from his mouth. The spout collided with Shino's technique, and struggled with it for a second, before completely running through it, scattering insects left and right. The spout hit Shino in the stomach, and pushed him back several feet before finally dissipating. Shino doubled over, coughing as he struggled to regain his breath. As the man regained his stature from his attack, Hinata came rushing into his space quickly. On instinct alone, he managed to dodge the first few palm strikes by the Hyuga. Hinata, sensing he was off balance still, decided to finish the job there and now. She took a step back, crouching low while her right hand raised above her head. Shugohak Rokjuyon Sho, she stated, before diving into the man's area for the first two strikes of the technique. The man had other plans, however, as he sidestepped Hinata, and grabbed her head from behind, pressing his body against hers to apply pressure. The Hyuga legacy doesn't mean a thing, he spoke to her, if you can't even get the first few hits on my person. With that, he then used a snap mare shoulder throw, slamming the young girl into the ground face first. He then lifted his left hand, as Tezumateki collided with the metal underside of his knuckle guard. Naruto growled at the man's incredible strength. And then there was one, he said to Naruto, as he stood up to keep his leverage. You're going to pay for treating my friend so roughly, old man, spat Naruto. Rough, said the man. Kid, if I wanted to be rough, your first friend would be sporting a broken shoulder, your second friend would have a few cracked ribs and maybe a pierced lung, and your lady friend, after I had my way with her, would be lucky to not need surgery. So, he began, as he then tugged on the blade of Tezumateki with a lot of force, sending Naruto right towards him, where he then gave him a swift, straight punch to the gut. Naruto doubled over, as he was almost ready to pass out from that one punch. Consider that a love tap, finished the man. Now that you four have ruined my research, I'm going home. With his business done, the man preformed a few kata, before slamming his hand into the ground, producing a rather large toad. He mounted said toad, and soon was out of sight. It took a few minutes, but Naruto had recovered from the attack. He then surveyed his friends to check for any major damage. He first saw to Hinata, and aside a nasty bump on her head and a few bruises here and there, she seemed to be okay. He leapt over to the now abandoned bath, and brought Kiba back to the other side of the bamboo wall. He was much like Hinata, maybe even worse off as his assailants were scorned women. He then saw Shino approaching him. Shino just held his hand up to Naruto. I'm shaken, but fine, he told the blonde. Shall we go after him? Said Kiba. Yeah, let's get to the bottom of this. There is no way he's just an old man, answered Naruto. He is indeed dangerous, commented Shino. Not only did he defeat us with one move each, but he was wise and effective with his choices. He even knew about my family fighting style, said Hinata. There's only a handful of people outside of the family that know its secrets. Let's pursue. He couldn't have gotten that far, said Naruto, as the four shinobi vanished into the night air. However, Naruto didn't account for the man's transportation into his calculations. Given that he was alone, and had an animal to ride on top of, the man would have no need of taking breaks to catch his breath and rest up. However, Naruto and the gang had youth, and healthy young bodies, so it helped him to keep chase to the man, relying on Hinata's Byakugan to keep track of the chakra trail the man left behind. It was daybreak when they noticed the man had stopped advancing forward. They must be getting close to his abode. They stopped their night-long sprint in front of a giant cliff face. It was rough, as should be expected, and had a few spots that stuck out from the rocky wall. It appeared to be a cliff that was left alone for the most part, as there were no obvious trails, tracks, or any sign of a human being passing through. At the base of the cliff, they saw the old man leap with his toad high into the air, landing on a spot of rock that had a cave carved into the wall. The man dismissed the toad, and walked into the cavern. Naruto and the others, using their ninja training, leapt up to the cave, using bits of jagged here and there as footholds to help them propel themselves up the cliff wall. The cavern entrance was rather new, as bits of dirt and stone still dropped from its rim from time to time. Inside, the tunnel spread outward, creating a large living shelter. There wasn't much in terms of furniture and such, but there were several stacks of rock and stone positioned to make a table, one stool, and a place for sleeping. The man was there on his bed, beginning to take off his sandals when he turned his head to his guests. You four again, he said. Now what do you want? Listen you, said Naruto, until Hinata put her hand up to interrupt him. We're here to apologize, she said to the man, making him quirk a brow at her. Hinata, what are you saying? Exclaimed Kiba. What did we do that we need to apologize to him for? Guys, don't you get it yet? She told them. Kiba and Naruto shook their heads, as Shino just stood still. We didn't know who we were fighting with, Lord Jiraiya, said Hinata, before bowing to him. Well, at least the lady knows her manners, said Jiraiya. He's, said Kiba. Shino nodded towards him, and soon they too, were bowing before the man. I don't get it, said Naruto, honestly confused. Sure, he may have been the Yondaim's teacher, but why are you guys treating him like he's royalty or something? You don't know, shouted Kiba, and then forced Naruto bow down stupid, he barked. It was a minute later, after the formalities were out of the way. Jiraiya sat down on the rock floor. The other followed suit. Naruto just looked at the man, who in turn glared back at him. He was still angry at the man for what he did last night. What really threw him for a loop was how the others just humbly took a beating and then asked him for their forgiveness. Naruto-san, spoke up Hinata, you really don't know about Lord Jiraiya. Not a thing, said Naruto, getting him a grunt from Jiraiya. Okay, then I guess you should get to know the basics, said Hinata. It was during the first Great Shinobi War, started Shino, first looking at Hinata to continue for her. She nodded at his silent request. It was a time when all 5 great shinobi nations were at war with each other, vying for control of land, and dominance above all the others. It was a time where great heroes were born from all 5 nations, and even some from unknown villages. The war was costly to say the least, and all the nations found themselves using dire methods to gain the upper hand. One such method was quickly graduating shinobi out of the academies, and having any chunin or jonin available to train them, regardless of their previous experience, continued Hinata. As such, even shinobi who never taught genin were suddenly given students to train. One such person was the Sandaime, Sarutobi, when he was still just a jonin. Sarutobi was given 3, and only 3, student to train, continued Shino. Needless to say, Sarutobi was regarded as a great shinobi, even before he became a kage. The 3 students benefited greatly from his talents. They were all very fond of their teacher as well. However, given the fact that they became shinobi in the middle of a dire war, they met with constant danger. And yet, continued Kiba, they accomplished numerous missions, many with great importance in helping end the war. Their heroic deeds grew in number quickly, and all of the nations were soon littered with stories about their masterful fighting, near-limitless chakra, and encyclopedic knowledge of ninjutsu. It was such an unprecedented team of shinobi that the other 4 nations grew to fear these 3 students of Sarutobi, said Hinata. As such, after the war ended, and Sarutobi became the kage, he decreed that these 3 shinobi would be given a rank all their own. Legendary shinobi, or Sannin. One is a man named Orochimaru, the snake charmer. Another is our Gondaime, Tsunade, the slug tamer. And last but not least, said Hinata, looking at Jiraiya, Lord Jiraiya, the toad hermit. The hermit looked at the 4 before him, rather surprised at their telling of his tale. He shrugged at the idea that he was actually admired in Konoha, not after. No, he didn't want to think about it anymore. At least some people in Konoha still respect their forefathers, he said to them. But, interjected Kiba, we were told that you were killed in action. Oh really? Said Jiraiya, an amused smile growing on his face. Yes, I guess that would be just like those council bastards. I wonder if that dumb bitch Tsunade actually helped them spread the word. Hey, shouted Naruto. How can you say something so cold about your own teammate? That's none of your damn business. Shouted back Jiraiya, a look in his eye that actually made Naruto shut his legendary big mouth. Now before I lose my patience with you 4, he said to them, just what the hell do you want with me? Well sir, spoke Hinata, it's like this. Naruto here is the Jinchuriki of Konoha. Jiraiya, at mention of this, looked Naruto over quizzically. This was the boy trusted with the demon. I see, said Jiraiya, so you're the Uzumaki. Anyways, recently Kyuubi managed to break through the seal and attack people. Thankfully, he only killed several shinobi who were currently Naruto's enemies. But now Tsunade sent us here to ask for your help repairing the seal. And why should I do that? Asked Jiraiya. Please Lord Jiraiya, said Hinata, if the seal is left unchecked, we won't have anything else to hold back the Kyuubi. You think the seal is just to hold in the Kitsune no Kyuubi? Said Jiraiya at Hinata's statement. Well, that's what it's for, isn't it? Jiraiya laughed at this, though his 4 guests didn't find the humor. That seal is for more than holding Kyuubi in place kids, he said condescendingly. My student would know better than to just leave something that powerful unchecked. So what's it do, if you're so knowledgeable about it? Asked Kiba. It's a resistance buffer for Naruto, to put it in an understandable way, said Jiraiya, as he stood up, and walked over to his bed. He picked up a bottle of sake, and poured himself some for his aching throat. The chakra of Kyuubi is powerful, but it can be contained. As long as Naruto has been able to survive, his chakra is at war with Kyuubi's chakra. This will continue until Kyuubi's chakra is completely exhausted. Why would the Yondaime do something like that? Asked Hinata. Couldn't he just have the seal absorb the chakra and give it to Naruto? It could, but it would be very dangerous, to say the least, answered Jiraiya. Using the power of Kyuubi's chakra is grounds to let the demon gain influence over the boy, so the Yondaime tried it in the opposite direction. He made it so Naruto's chakra grows stronger as it continues to fight off the Kyuubi's chakra. Eventually, Naruto's chakra will be strong enough to extinguish the Kyuubi entirely. This way, not only does Kyuubi die, but Naruto will essentially have a chakra reserve as big as Kyuubi's due to his body's constant fighting of it. So Lord Jiraiya, will you aid us? Asked Hinata. She was hopeful, seeing as Jiraiya was being generous enough to let them in on the secrets of Naruto's seal. No, said Jiraiya simply. What? Why the hell not? Don't you want to help Konoha? Asked Kiba. Kid, you must be really stupid, he told the Inuzuka. If I was still with Konoha, why the hell would I be living in a caves much like this one I made? I've cut my ties to Konoha, as they've done to me. So if all you've got to convince is the whole loyalty shit, then you're wasting both our time. We're not leaving until you say yes, old man, said Naruto. Well then, I guess you better camp outside of the cave, because you're going to be here for a long time, retorted Jiraiya, pouring himself another cup of sake. The frustrated youths left the cave, leaving the old man in peace. They obviously weren't going to get anywhere with the hermit tonight, so they decided to stay nearby to put the pressure on him. They quickly sprinted back to their lodge in the city, and after gathering their things, returned to the cliff side. They got out the camping equipment, which any good shinobi always has around, and set up camp right next to the cliff. The next morning, Jiraiya woke up from his stone bed, and got up. He stretched out a bit, and popped his spine back into place, as sleeping on a stone bed was a nightmare for one's back. He put on his sandals, and walked out to greet the morning. He outstretched his arms, as he let the sunlight wash over his face. He had a bad day yesterday, but it seemed that today would look up for him. That is, until Jiraiya looked down the cliff, to see 3 little tents on the ground. He also saw the 4 brats from yesterday. One was collecting the dishes, one was taking in some reading, and the other 2 were away from the site sparring. He shrugged at the scene. What else did he have to do today, being a hermit? He leapt off his high perch, and landed just a few feet from the campsite in a feat of pure precision. Jiraiya looked up to see it was Hinata Hyuga cleaning up after the 3 boys. She leered her eyes over to Jiraiya's direction, acknowledging the man's presence. Jiraiya walked over in a slow, carefree pace towards her. After all, he knew that this girl couldn't beat her, Hyuga or not. Ain't that just like men to leave the woman in the group to clean up after them, he commented, trying to start some dialogue. It's no big deal for me, replied Hinata, never taking her eyes off her work. I've been doing this for Shino and Kiba-kun ever since we were first paired together. Adding Naruto into the mix doesn't change it up much. And you're okay with being their maid? Asked Jiraiya. I'm not their maid, and they know that, said Hinata. We all do our part to help with the chores. Besides, they're my best friends, and this is what friends do for each other. Said Jiraiya, rolling his eyes into his head. He wasn't going to have any fun with Hinata. She was too serious and she easily brushed off any taunts he made at her. He made his way over to the reader, who happened to be Shino. Shino was even more standstill than Hinata. If one didn't know any better, they would think the Aberrane was dead in his tracks. He was perfectly still. You couldn't even see his chest rising as he breathed. The book he was reading was bare of a cover, and had a few kanji written onto it. And you're catching up on your basics, taunted Jiraiya. He was hoping Shino was one of those guys that just put up a front in the presence of others. This is my family's log, he spoke, never moving. I'm reading up on the effects water has on certain species of bug. Oh, I hope I didn't offend you by splashing you around a bit with my technique, replied Jiraiya. Anything and everything goes in combat, said Shino simply. Isn't that one of those basics you mentioned, Lord Jiraiya? And that was strike 2 for the hermit. Honestly, this had to be the most uptight bunch he ever met. Not one would give him the pleasure of getting under their skin. Still, he had 2 more dupes before he could give up, so he walked over to see Naruto and Kiba's sparring match. As far as sparring matches went, this one was pretty tame. This was especially weird considering the 2 combatants, Kiba Inuzuka, the wild beast man, and Naruto, the big mouth with the big axe. Little did Jiraiya know about how Tsunade sat down with the 4 and gave them a little advice. Sure, they could train with each other, as one would expect even if a shinobi was out on a mission. However, she warned them not to go all out, as the stress might be enough to let Kyuubi get out once again. So hence, Kiba and Naruto were simply going at each other with basic strikes, grapples, jabs, kicks, and maneuvers. To the both of them, it was a pain in the ass. After not seeing each other in years, They really wanted to see what the other was made of. Still, Kiba would rather fight Naruto than Kyuubi, and Naruto wanted to stay alive, so they had to swallow their pride and wait for their real fight in the future. You two seem to be having fun, judging by the scowls on your mugs, spoke up Jiraiya. Kiba and Naruto halted their practice at notice of their intruder. Like you would be a perfect judge of character, old man, snorted Naruto. Now listen, brat, said Jiraiya, how long are you going to speak to me with such disrespect? Probably a long time, answered Naruto. I don't have much respect for people who abandon their village, and just go about doing whatever the hell they want. Jiraiya rubbed at his forehead at this kid. I'm going to ignore that comment, seeing as the person who uttered it is an ignorant twit with blonde hair, he spoke darkly. Oh, did I hit a nerve? Said Naruto, now being the instigator of the conversation. Well, maybe it wouldn't be there to hit if you would have any dignity and honor left. The way you carry yourself, I suppose you left over something as trivial as a girl smacking you for being a lech. That was as far as he would go, as far as Jiraiya was concerned. However, instead of going all out on the young whelp, he simply turned towards the cave again. Jiraiya wasn't one to let the kid go without some sort of punishment though, especially one who violated him so. Hair Jizzo, said Jiraiya to himself, as his long, white hair started to contract and stiffen. After a few moments, several sharp spikes of the hair launched themselves off of Jiraiya's head, making a beeline for Naruto. Naruto, who was still beaming at his browbeating of the hermit, didn't notice in time, and was soon pinned to a nearby tree, with all of the spikes, thankfully, missing any painful places. As Naruto struggled to free himself, and Kiba coming over to help pry off the spikes, Jiraiya went back up to his cavern in the sky. He sat on his rock bed, picked up a bottle of his sake, and helped himself to a large gulp of the liquid. Naruto, after being released from his tree prison, leapt up to the cavern entrance. Come up here to complain? Asked Jiraiya, not even bothering to look at the boy. Look, said Naruto, sounding unusually serious. Let's get to the point. Why is it that you won't help me? Why you won't help Konoha? It was at this that Jiraiya looked over to the boy. What was Naruto's game this time? After all the abuse and signals Jiraiya had given to Naruto, he still was up here asking for his help. What was it that kept him coming back for more punishment? Why do you keep doing this to me, to yourself? Asked Jiraiya. As their Jinchuriki, I'm sure Konoha has given you more than your fair share of abuse. Why put your neck out on the line for a village who doesn't care about you? Well, that's simple, said Naruto, gaining a disdained look from the hermit. I do it because of the people who don't abuse me. I've taken a lot of crap, yeah, and some of it I've taken from a few of the guys below us. But that's not going to stop me from protecting the ones who do care for me. That's why I need you to fix this blasted seal. Jiraiya looked at the kid, taking another big swill of his drink. He gasped in refreshment, and bowed his head down, either by shame or intoxication. But what if, said Jiraiya, lifting his head back to an aware level, the people you wanted to protect then turned their back on you? Naruto had no answer for that, because honestly he never thought something like that could happen. What do you mean? He asked Jiraiya, hoping for some clarification. I mean the reason I'm out here in this god-forsaken land. The reason I left Konoha. The reason why I feel no mercy or pity for them right now, given their situation, he replied. 22 years ago, somewhere outside the border of the Nation of Fire. All right, said Orochimaru, let's go over this one more time. Do we have to? Asked Jiraiya. This isn't exactly a mission that we haven't done before, ya know. I will anyway, given the one with the objections is you, Jiraiya, retorted Orochimaru. We've been given the last reconnaissance patrol for the night. We sweep the border, take care of any spies, and report back without any hassle. Shouldn't be too hard a night then, said Tsunade, as she looked over her person, making sure she was keeping a healthy stock of medical supplies with her. The time for talk is over, said Orochimaru, we leave now. And with that, the three Sannin vanished into the night. They formed a line formation, with each of them separated by several feet between the others. Orochimaru headed the line, while Jiraiya held the back of the line. Tsunade was put in the middle given her versatility and her being the medical shinobi of the group. The border, unlike its forested country, was quite bare. This was most likely because of all the fighting, dueling, and traffic coming across it all the time. So since they couldn't rely on much concealment to stay safe, they resorted to the opposite, staying in the open air, so they could react quickly to anything. They had managed to scour half of the eastern border without any incident. Suddenly a large, loud explosion emerged right in front of Orochimaru, causing him to hit the brakes on his sprint. He quickly turned his head to his partners. "It's a minefield. Scatter," he shouted, knowing full well how shinobi mines worked. Regardless of the outcome of the first explosion, the others in the area would explode as well, in order to ensure that the victim could not escape. All three valiantly tried their best to escape the blasts, but eventually they were hit. The first was Jiraiya, who was blasted straight down onto the ground from the mine. Tsunade was hit next, as she saw her teammate get hit. She landed a ways from Jiraiya, flat on her back. She groaned, as she might have possibly busted some vertebrae on the impact. Orochimaru was hit by more than one explosion, and was sent flying high, before plummeting towards his earthly grave. Tsunade, still in pain, crawled her way over to Orochimaru to check for vitals. She reached Orochimaru, and lifted herself on top of him, placing her ear to his chest. She breathed a bit in relief, as there was a pretty strong pulse. Still, he wasn't opening his eyes, so he must have gotten a concussion to say the least. She heard footsteps behind them, and looked up to see a man staring at them. He was wrapped from head to toe, looking much like a mummy or a corpse. The bandages themselves weren't the usual white, they were more of a dark blue, with the occasional splotch of blood here and there. Aside from the bandages, he kept himself warm by wearing a shinobi vest, and had on thick pants with regular black shoes. "Tsunade," whispered Orochimaru, starting to come back to fruition. "Get down." Tsunade, concerned for her teammate, went against her judgment and did as she was told. Orochimaru quickly raised his right arm at the assailant. "Hitoshizu Hibite," murmured Orochimaru, as he unleashed 3 snake prongs towards the man, connecting with his right arm as he raised it in defense. "Get the hell away from them!" shouted Jiraiya, and the 3 looked over the man to see him charging at the now limited opponent. The mummy man never moved however, and simply out of tremendous reflexes and speed, grabbed Jiraiya by the throat. He then slammed the Sannin down onto his teammates. As they were rattled by the slam, the man backed off and started to preform kata. "Jiraiya, get your fat ass off of me," grunted Tsunade. "What do you think I'm trying to do?" he replied gruffly. It was a few seconds before they managed to untangle themselves. Unfortunately, the man had finished his kata. Orochimaru's eyes widened as he sensed the immediate danger. "Get out of the way," he shouted, as he shoved both his teammates away from him. He then turned to escape as well, but it was too late. The man had activated a technique none of them were familiar with, as he grabbed a large slab of the earth below them, used his chakra to shape it into a giant spike, and hurled it towards Orochimaru. Orochimaru, too wrapped up with getting his teammates out of the way, was hit in the back, towards his lower spine. He cringed as the spike began to piece his flesh, causing a lot of blood to pour out of his back. He fell down to the ground flat on his stomach, his face showing he was experiencing ecliptic shock. "Orochimaru," shouted Tsunade, as she ran over to assess the damage. She got him on his side to help with the shock, and tried to get him to talk to her. All he could mutter was, "My legs, can't feel, legs." Tsunade was glad he was still awake, but then turned it into unbridled wrath. She charged the mummy, striking at it with various punches and elbows. The man dodged them, before sidestepping her to try and choke her. As he wrapped his left arm around her throat, she bit into his arm, digging into the flesh. She cringed at the texture. Was this really a walking corpse? Nevertheless, she overcame her disgust, and after applied chakra to her neck, twisted it with enough force to rip the arm clear off the man's body. The man, most surprisingly, didn't even flinch at the dismemberment. Tsunade flipped into the air, high above him. He was nothing more than prey now. Not many shinobi can use ninjutsu with only one arm, and she had a feeling a guy who tasted like he was dead for a month wasn't one of the lucky few. She dove straight down, her right foot aimed at the ground like a missile. "Sutenkyaku," she shouted, as her foot collapsed the earth below her. The man was thrown into the air by the resulting crater. "Jiraiya," shouted Tsunade. "I'm on it," said Jiraiya. He leaped into the air, getting a good distance above their prey. He held his left arm close to his body, as he quickly collected chakra into the palm. Rasengan, yelled Jiraiya, as he put the blinding ball of chakra ahead of his descent. He landed directly on the small of the man's head, and tore through the whole body with the Rasengan, cutting the man's corpse in two. Jiraiya corrected himself on his landing, followed soon by the two chunks of their assailant. How is he? Asked Jiraiya, as he rushed over to assist Tsunade. He's almost in complete shock by the blow, said Tsunade. And I don't want to risk taking out that spike yet until we get him to a hospital. If I did, it might bleed him out faster. Then I guess we're heading back to Konoha, said Jiraiya. He fireman carried his male teammate on his back, and then Tsunade and he sprinted towards Konoha. It would be a week before Orochimaru would be able to start recovering. However, he would never be a shinobi again. The spike severed the cord, and he was paralyzed from the waist down. Tsunade and Jiraiya went to their friend and comrade to him the bad news. Orochimaru was sad, but did nothing more than shed a few tears for his loss. Jiraiya shook his head on the inside at his friend's effort to keep up his image. Tsunade was a different story, for as soon as the two left Orochimaru alone in his room, she clasped onto Jiraiya like a vice. Jiraiya simply let her cry all she wanted to at the bad news, gently stroking her hair. And then, the worst was yet to come. What the fuck do you mean by that? Shouted Jiraiya, banging his fists on the hardwood table. We mean what we say, Lord Jiraiya, said Daisuke, who sat on the opposite end of the table with his fellow council members. Why did you send that monster to attack your friends? I have no idea how you got such a crazy idea. He shouted again. That monster, as you call it, attacked all of us. I have no idea who or what the hell it was. Then explain this, said Kotaro, who slid across the table a dossier. Jiraiya opened it and scanned the pages. I'll make it simple for you, Lord Jiraiya, said Kotaro. That dossier contains information concerning your bank records, mission history, and the like. Notice that some of the expenses are listed as lab supplies. Also, the Anbu finished their autopsy of the corpse, said Rotaru. It seems that man was a creation of someone, using parts of other human beings, and fusing them together. A regular walking corpse, as it were. Luckily for you and the others, this one seemed to have its defects, but our findings suggest this man, if he were made correctly, would be more than a match for you three. I'm no scientist, you old bats, shouted Jiraiya. Why the hell would I need a laboratory? Maybe not yourself, said Yasuko, but we've no idea where those funds were used. For all we know, you could have hired some people to make them for you. And then there's the icing on the cake, said Daisuke, sliding another dossier towards Jiraiya. Here's what we found on the body. Look familiar. The dossier had a single photo containing the severed arm of the shinobi. On its wrist was a bracelet, to which Jiraiya's eyes widened in disbelief. Well, answer us, Jiraiya, said Yasuko. It's the bracelet that one of my recent missions wore. I was ordered to kill him. But Anbu took the body after I gave it to them. Yes, but they have no record of the bracelet being on his person at the time. The only explanation is that someone took it off before you gave it to the Anbu. That would be you, Jiraiya. This isn't true, shouted Jiraiya. I've done nothing to this village, and I certainly wouldn't do anything to my friends. At this, the door behind all five of them opened. Jiraiya turned to see Tsunade there, her face red from crying, and tears still running down her cheeks. You did this? Asked Tsunade darkly. Tsunade, you know started Jiraiya. Tsunade wasn't in the mood for excuses, and simply rushed Jiraiya, landing a straight punch on his nose. The force of Tsunade's blow shot Jiraiya across the table. He raised his right hand to touch his nose, but flinched at the pain it caused to even brush against it. Tsunade had definitely broken his nose with that punch. Anyways, Jiraiya, this is a very serious offense. Out of your former duties and services to Konoha, we'd be reluctant to execute you, said Daisuke. Forget it, said Jiraiya, picking himself up off the floor. I know when I'm not wanted. I'll sign the necessary papers, and I'll leave Konoha. The Konoha gates opened solemnly, as Jiraiya looked to the sky, as if he needed answers from above. He was clenching his teeth, trying so hard to try and look past this current tragedy, but it was tough. He walked himself out of the village, and stood still as the gates closed behind him with a cold-blooded thud. He started to walk down the path when he saw a shadow under one of the numerous trees. Who is it? He said, rather disheartened. Just wanted to say goodbye to a dear, old friend, spoke the voice, causing Jiraiya to almost lose his sanity. The shadow came into the light, and revealed Orochimaru, a victorious grin plastered on his face. Orochimaru, uttered Jiraiya. I don't understand. I suppose you wouldn't, said Orochimaru. But the point of it is, Jiraiya old friend, is that you've become a liability to me. He seethed, you set me up. Honestly, said Orochimaru, you should really take it as a compliment, that I see you as a threat to my future endeavors. By the way, what did you think of my little creation? You son of a. Not so fast with that killing intent old friend, said Jiraiya. I'm still Konoha shinobi. If you were to slay me, you know that all the Anbu in Konoha would be after you until they slit your throat. I'd even be willing to bet that Tsunade would lead the charge for your head, after you crippled her crush. Jiraiya, with every inch of his being, wanted to kill the snake bastard right there and then. But what of the consequences? He would never be forgiven by Tsunade if he did. His instinct was willing his legs to move towards Orochimaru, but his mind and heart were keeping him from doing so. Anyways, said Orochimaru, I thought it would at least be polite of me to say goodbye to you. Despite this ending, I can't say that you weren't a dear friend of mine. Goodbye Jiraiya, and try not to get yourself killed. With that, Orochimaru vanished back into the shadows. Back to present day. And that's why I live here in caves, said Jiraiya, taking a swill of his sake once again. I was like you, stupid to believe my friends and loved ones had my back, but that was taken from me by those very people. So why should I feel sorry for their asses? Why shouldn't I just be content to watch them all die by Kyuubi's hands? It would only be the karma that they had placed upon their own souls if it were to happen. I walk alone Naruto, and I plan to keep it that way. Naruto looked down at the floor, mostly in shame of his own attitude. Here he was, an ignorant brat trying to tell this legendary shinobi about honor and duty, and he knew about it more than Naruto could ever know. He felt like such a jackass, as he recalled all the things he said to Jiraiya in ignorance of his plight. Jiraiya got up off of his bed. Well, come on, let's get this over with, he said. Naruto perked his head up at this announcement. What? I said, let's get down there and fix my student's seal, said Jiraiya. You'll do it, said Naruto, a look of hope on his face. For a price, said Jiraiya. This caused Naruto's face to drop again. We don't have any money, said Naruto. I know that you moron, replied Jiraiya. So which is why we'll have a contract. With that, Jiraiya pulled out a parchment from his sleeve. He unrolled it in front of the blonde, who quickly read over the simple wording. In exchange for services, blank will pay Lord Jiraiya his demanded price, said Naruto. He looked down to find the hermit's asking price. 100,000 gold yo. He shouted. What are you bitching about? Retorted Jiraiya. Seems to me to be a small price to pay for the extraordinary service I'm about to perform. If you agree, put some of your blood on the contract, and then give it to that crusty old bitch Tsunade. Naruto sighed at the proposition. Not because he didn't like it, even though he did. What ticked him off was that this was his first, and only, option of getting the seal fixed. He bit into his thumb, and then placed a thumbprint onto the parchment. Good, said Jiraiya, rolling the parchment up. But how will you get your pay? Asked Naruto. That's what the blood is for, said Jiraiya. If Konoha tries to cheat me out of the money, I can simply undo the seal by means of using your blood. Extortion, said Naruto. More like assurance, said Jiraiya, and since you know my past, the least you could do is give me the benefit of the doubt. Naruto and Jiraiya approached the campsite, gathering Kiba, Shino, and Hinata the good news. After such, Jiraiya began his preparations. He started by placing 12 scrolls into the ground, much like tent spikes, and placed them in a circular shape. He then connected them by drawing a circle. He then started the second part. He told Naruto to take off his shirt and vest, and lay in the middle of the circle. Naruto did as he was told, and he let his body lie flat on the ground. Jiraiya bit into his thumb, and began to write runes and kata into the ground. He would start at one scroll, and kept writing until he got to Naruto. Then he'd move on to the next scroll and repeat the process. Aren't you in danger of losing your life by performing this? Asked Hinata. That would be the case if I need to seal something, said Jiraiya, never taking his eyes off his work. But in this case, I'm just fixing a previous seal, so the price should be a bit less severe. After a few more minutes, Jiraiya had finished with his writings around the circle. The then stood over Naruto, his feet by both his shoulders, and began to form kata with blazing speed. Everyone stood in silence, as they figured something this intricate needed the utmost concentration. As Jiraiya preformed the kata, the letters of blood started to glow with chakra. It was about a half hour before Jiraiya finished, and by then the entire circle had started to glow. Jiraiya raised his right hand, and started to shout his ki. The letters started to float towards him, wrapping up his arm and stopping on his hand. Jiraiya's eyes flinched at the pain the technique caused him. He then looked down to Naruto, who looked at him with a worried look on his face. "I tell you to bite down on something, kid," he said to Naruto, "but you'll have to just grit your teeth." With that, Jiraiya slammed his palm onto Naruto's stomach, the letters now crawling onto Naruto's flesh. Naruto clenched his teeth so hard, he was afraid of grinding them to dust. The pain was tremendous, as he felt something inside him stir and try to fight off the invading seal. This was almost as bad as when he opened his konwaza with Futeki. After 10 minutes of agony, the worst was over, as Naruto felt the pain start to recede. He looked down to see the Yondaime seal back, looking good as new. Jiraiya collapsed behind the boy. "Lord Jiraiya," he shouted, as he checked on the hermit. "I'm fine," said the man, "I just won't be able to move for a bit. I'll be good as new in a week." "Lord Jiraiya," said Naruto, I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by proving me wrong, brat," he told Naruto. "Prove me wrong about Konoha, and protect those special to you. Now get." Naruto simply nodded, seeing that Jiraiya no longer wanted words out of him. They were reluctant to leave Jiraiya out in the open, but he said they'd be wasting their time worrying. With that, they said the goodbyes, packed up the things, and started making their way home. Footnotes. 1. Some people are constantly nitpicking the story. You can't please everyone all of the time, but sometimes I feel like some of my loyal readers just find something to complain about. Still, I value their opinions, and I will listen to them. However, I will make up my mind in the end about each chapter, so if you're not satisfied, well, I'm sorry to hear that. 2. Some people might be surprised to see our little Hinata more confident with herself. Given Naruto's banishment being part of the plot, I had to think about what Hinata would do if she didn't have someone to crush on. The first option was quite grim, and I didn't want to do that to the poor girl, so the second one was the choice. Given her teammates, Hinata has been able to break her shell, and be content with herself. Hence, she's confidant, and she gotten attached to Kiba and Shino, but in a good way. I hope that clarifies decision on Hinata. 3. People will no doubt have questions as to Jiraiya after they read this. Just know I will address them after I get the reviews in. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.